Hi, this is Jim Kweskin. I'm going to be performing at Joe's Pub this coming Wednesday, May 30th, with the wonderful singer Samoa Wilson. It's in Manhattan at 425 Lafayette. Hope you come see me. And I'm on the radio now with Rabbi Sol Solomon on Dave's Gone By.
Oh, shalom, my friends, shalom. This is your old pal, Rabbi Sol Solomon, and I've got music in my ears because we're going to be talking to a folk musician who goes back to the early 60s when all that great music was happening in America. He's Jim Kweskin. Now, if that name might not ring a bell, you know, I will stand sometimes on a street corner and I'll look at the occasional girl and I'll go, ooh, nice jugs. But nobody had nicer jugs than Jim Kweskin because he founded a jug band that played that old-timey folky music. And you know what? You can go hear him this Wednesday, May 30th, at Joe's Pub. It's part of the Public Theater in New York, over on 425 Lafayette Street, playing that great folk music that he does. But right now, we have Jim Kweskin on the phone with us, and welcome him with a shalom. Shalom, Jim.
Shalom to you.
First of all, how you feeling? How you doing?
I'm okay, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, you know, I've got the usual aches and pains. I'm Jewish. This is a thing. You're not Jewish, are you?
I am.
Oh, you are? On all sides, mother and father?
Yes.
So where does your lineage come from? What's your heritage?
Eastern European Jews from Lithuania, Latvia.
Was it always Kweskin, or did they do something at Ellis Island, or did you shorten something?
No, I think it was always Kweskin, but I'm not 100% sure.
Now, one thing we do want to make sure that people aren't confused if they're looking for this man on the interwebs, it's Kweskin, Kweskin, not to be confused with Kweskin the Mentalist, who has also been on this radio program of The Stream. But Jim Kweskin, how did you first get into playing music?
Well, I was very attracted to old-time music because my father had some old records from the 20s and 30s, Bessie Smith and Leadbelly and some early jazz, you know, Big Spiderbeck and the early Louis Armstrong and Sidney Bechet and Jelly Roll Morton. And I just fell in love with that music. And then as I got to my early teen years, I heard folk music, people like Pete Seeger and the Weavers and Burl Ives, and I fell in love with that music. So I had those two kinds of music kind of swirling around inside me all through my youth. You know, I started to meet people who played the guitar and sing, and I wanted to do the same thing. So it was just kind of like all kind of came together little by little.
Were you part of that New York early 1960s scene around West 3rd Street and...
Yeah, no, I was there. I had gigs at the Gaslight Cafe and on McDougal Street, and I was playing down there.
So these people that you talk about in terms of like Phil Oakes and the Peter, Paul and Mary and the Bob Dylan, did you actually physically see them and were you on bills with them, that sort of thing?
Yes.
Well, do you have any memories, any anecdotes?
Well, I'll give you an example. I was playing at the Gaslight Cafe, this would be about 1962, and there were 4 shows a night. Peter Stamfel playing the banjo and singing, he was the first set. He eventually became part of the Holy Modal Rounders.
Right.
The second set was me playing the guitar and singing. The third set was Bob Dylan. He was playing the guitar and singing. And the fourth set was the three of us together.
What? Wait. What song did you guys sing together when you were with Dylan and Peter Stamfel?
A lot of Woody Guthrie songs.
Oh, makes sense. Seeing and being on the same bill as Bob Dylan back in that period, did you see him as special or just another one of you guys with a kind of a different voice?
Actually, both. I mean, he was definitely special. He was extremely entertaining on stage, and he was just an amazing performer. But he was also just, you know, he was one of us guys, too, so he was both.
Did he change when he got Albert Grossman as the manager? Did he suddenly become more standoffish, and suddenly he wasn't like the same guy you hoist a beer with and sing for the encore with?
Well, he was never just one of the guys. He was never a hangout kind of, just one of the guys kind of guy. He was a little bit, but he also had his own private world that he lived in. Yeah, the main thing about him is that when I knew him, he had a pad of paper, and he was constantly writing. I mean, songs were spewing out of him like water out of a fountain. And it was like nonstop. We would sit at a cafe across the street to have something to eat from across the street from the Gaslight, getting ready to go on or do our show. He'd be sitting over there with a pad of paper on the table, just furiously
Or something. That one I think he wrote in a hotel, but some of the others for sure he was. But
Yeah.
once he had his second album out, did you and some of the other people you were with now start to feel forced or compelled to write your own songs as opposed to doing old folk standards and covering other people?
I did not. I'm not a songwriter, so I didn't have that problem. I didn't have to think about it. I interpreter of old songs. You know, nowadays when you do songs that were done by somebody else, it's called covering it. You know, they have cover bands, you know that. And if you do any song that was earlier done by whoever, you know, Joni Mitchell or James Taylor or whoever it is, and you do it, it's called covering it. But of course I do songs, folk songs and traditional songs that were recorded, you know, in the 1920s or earlier. So I was on stage not too long ago, fairly recently, and I said to the audience, well, if I do a song that was recorded 90 years ago, am I covering it? And somebody in the audience said, no, you're uncovering it.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
I thought that was cool. So that's what I do. I uncover songs.
Well, it's kind of like when Neil Young and his band did a whole album of Americana. I think that was the actual title of it. And they did Oh, Susanna. Is that really a cover version of Oh, Susanna? You know, it's a fair question.
Exactly.
Let me even roll it back a little bit more. Were you influenced by the Weavers and any Pete Seeger memories? Yeah, please.
Well, when I was about 13 years old, my parents sent me to a summer camp. This had been in the 50s. Pete Seeger came and gave a concert there, and of course that's about the only jobs he could get because he was blacklisted. So he couldn't play in any of the clubs or any of the concert halls or on radio or on television. So all he could get was, you know, like concerts at summer camps and places that would be willing to hire him. He was considered a communist or a radical. But anyway, I was there 13 and I saw him, and of course I just loved what he did. He was just amazing. So yes, definitely influenced me. He also influenced me to learn how to get an audience to sing along. That was one of his great strengths. One of the things that Pete Seeger did better than anybody. I still think he did it better than anybody has done it since.
Well, what's the secret besides saying, hey, everybody sing along? How do you get an audience to join in?
Well, it's the energy, it's the way you say it, it's knowing what to ask them to do, and I don't know, it's just talent. Like any other talent, it's a talent.
Now, speaking of talent, are you completely self-taught guitar, or did you learn anything from Rick Von Schmidt or people like that, or how did you learn to play?
Well, first of all, I took lessons as a kid. My parents, when I was a little young teenager, about 12, 13, 14 years old, I took lessons from just a guy in my hometown who taught jazz guitar. But he mostly was just teaching me chords because I was a beginner. That went on for a little while, and then later on, when I got to college, I wanted to learn. My favorite guitar player was Mississippi John Hurt.
Oh.
And I wanted to be able to fingerpick like Mississippi John Hurt. And I had this teacher that I knew in Cambridge, who was also a performer, named Rolf Kahn. And he taught me how to fingerpick.
You've been doing that ever since. But let me ask you, in terms of, it's one thing to be a folk group like the Weavers or the Chad Mitchell Trio, but you went in an even sort of more down-home, southern-ish tradition. What made you think, oh, let's do jug band style?
Well, like I say, you know, if you think about what I was listening to and what kind of music I was loving as a young person, it was early jazz and folk music. And if you think about it, that's really all jug band music is. It's like early jazz played on folk music instruments. Instead of using trumpets and saxophones and trombones and clarinets, you're using kazoos and harmonicas and fiddles and wash tubs and washboards and comb and tissue paper and all that kind of stuff. But you're playing jazzy tunes, but on folk music instruments. And that's just what a jug band is, and that's what I was attracted to. Even before I'd ever heard a jug band, I was already playing that kind of music.
Wow. So when people think of Jim Kweskin and his band, they of course think of you, but also the Muldaurs. So how did they get into the mix?
Well, Geoff Maria and I, in the early 60s, I did a concert in Boston, and he was booked as, it was a co-bill. We had not even really met each other or barely knew each other, and somebody decided to put on a show. It was called The Good Time Music of Jim Kweskin and the Bittersweet Blues of Geoff Muldaur. So because we were going to do a concert together, we decided, well, maybe we could do a couple of songs together. You know, he would do his set, I would do my set, but maybe we could do a few songs together. So I think he came over to my place, or I went over to his place. I don't remember. But anyway, we got together and we started working on a few songs, and it sounded pretty good. We liked playing together. And he was like 19, and I'm 22. You know, we were really young. Several months later, I was playing at the Club 47 in Cambridge, and I always had more than one person. I mean, it was never just me on stage. It was a gang of people. It was always I had a whole bunch of friends who played music in the Cambridge, Boston area, and I always have a harmonica player, a fiddle player, a mandolin player, Fritz Richmond playing the washed-up bass. It was always a gang of us up there just jamming on stage. That was what I loved to do.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a band. It was just a jam session. Anyway, so one night I didn't know it, but in the audience was Maynard Solomon, who was the president of Vanguard Records.
Whoa.
And he came up to me after the set and said, "I love what you're doing. How'd you like to make a record with that band?" And I said, "Well, that's not a band, but give me 3 or 4 months to put a band together, and I'd love to make a record." So I had a record deal before I had a band.
Wow.
And so now I got to put a band together, and I knew I wanted to put a band that was like a jug band. That's the kind of music I wanted to play. But I'm not a blues singer. I'm more of a ragtime, up-tempo jazz kind of singer, and I needed a guy who could sing blues, because a lot of what jug band music is blues. So Geoff Muldaur was such a great blues singer, and he's the first person I asked to join the jug band.
And then Maria, was he with his wife at that point, or was that later on?
Maria came later. The first jug band was Jeff and Fritz Richmond and Bob Siggins on banjo, who was playing with Charles River Valley Boys in Boston at the time, and my old friend David Simon, who was a harmonica player. So that was the very first jug band. That's the band that made the very first jug band album. Then we were doing a gig in '64. We were down in Greenwich Village doing a gig at the bitter end. The Even Dozen Jug Band came in to see us, and they were from New York. Maria was in that band, and her date was John Sebastian that night.
Oh.
And all that happened, Geoff Muldaur got up and sang with our band. He sang Wild About My Lovin', and she just fell in love with him for that.
She was wild about his loving instead of John Sebastian's. Okay.
And she ended up leaving New York, leaving that band, moving to Boston, and joining our band.
Wow. And that happened for a while. Of course, she later became famous on her own for Midnight at the Oasis and other stuff. Can I ask, in holding a band together, first of all, when you're just in your early 20s, and also through the very turbulent 60s, I mean, how chaotic and mad was it for even a folk band like you guys?
Well, I don't know. It was chaotic only in the sense that we didn't know what the hell we were doing. Everything was an experiment. And we would, try something, didn't work. Somebody wanted to do something, somebody else didn't want to do it. We would fight a lot or argue a lot about the key or the tempo or what song to do or who should play what or who should sing it. I mean, it was a lot of going back and forth. But it was, it was a process of boiling it down. So by the time we got done with it, it was the best we could do. And then very, very often it was really good. So in that sense, and the life we were living, I don't even know how we got by, but we didn't have much money. We didn't make much money, but somehow managed to scrape by and do gigs and get paid. Not a lot, but enough. I had an apartment in Cambridge. My rent was $65 a month.
Nice.
We got by. It was a very lively, exciting, experimental time. To me, it was a wonderful, wonderful part of my life. Wonderful time of life when I was learning songs and meeting people and traveling around the country and, meeting Spider John Kerner in Minneapolis and meeting Paul Butterfield in Chicago and meeting Steve Talbot in Berkeley and going to see Jesse Fuller in San Francisco and on and on and on, all over the country, meeting people and meeting Matt Lipscomb and him teaching me Sugar Babe and it's just on and on. It was just like that.
You sound totally put together, totally intelligent, and you did not blow your mind out on drugs and hallucinogens, even though there was that psychedelic era that you kind of glanced upon in your music at a certain point as well. How did you stay away?
I definitely took drugs. I was smoking a lot of pot for a short while, for a few years, and I took LSD. And I did all that stuff.
Do you regret it, or was it all part of the experience?
I don't regret it at all.
Oh, okay. But what about now? Not that we're going to get you arrested or anything, but how much do you do now?
None.
How come?
Just because it's not me now. It was me then, it's not me now. That's all.
So,
no reason.
Well, let me ask, let's see, are you a vegetarian? Do you eat everything?
I don't eat red meat, but I eat pretty much everything else.
Okay. In the music and the way things have evolved, let's take it out of the 1960s into the 70s. Did you suddenly find yourself having to change your music again and move more towards folk jazz than jug band?
I didn't change my music because of any other reason than I changed as I grew, and I only changed. Whatever change came from the inside out, not from the outside in. It wasn't any pressure or any influence, any desire on my part to please anybody other than myself. I was very fortunate in the 60s that the kind of music I wanted to play was a form of folk music at a time when folk music was very popular. So even though we weren't the Kingston Trio, and we weren't Peter, Paul, and Mary, we were a jug band. It was very on the periphery of folk music, so we were on all the folk festivals, and we were on all the folk shows, and we were very popular and successful because folk music was popular. I was very fortunate that happened. I would have been playing that music anyway, but my band became famous because folk music was popular.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like when that movie The Sting came out all those years ago. Suddenly any ragtime piano player had a whole new lease on life. You could play ragtime anyway, but boy, oh boy, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what happened. Then as folk music receded in its popularity, I mean, there still has been and always has been an underground, there's a lot of people who listen to and buy and go see and acoustic music and folk music and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff that is still going on, but it's not on the radio, it's not popular, it's not in the mainstream anymore. But that doesn't keep me from playing the music that I love, and I still have a nice fan base of people who like my music, and it keeps me going.
Speaking of still playing and still with a fan base, when people come to see you this Wednesday at Joe's Pub on Lafayette Street in Manhattan this Wednesday night...
Thank you for that plug.
You're very welcome. But what will they hear? In other words, what songs are you playing? Is it jug band style or more folk style? What do they expect?
This particular gig is going to be slightly different than the ones I usually do because I'm doing it with Simona Wilson, who's a wonderful singer, young lady who I've been performing with since she was a child. We're doing a bunch of jazz standards, mostly, and with a fairly good-sized band. We're going to have saxophone and clarinet, fiddle, and bass, and drums, and piano, and it's a little bit different than what I've been doing. I've done a lot of gigs recently solo, just play my guitar and sing a lot of these, jazzy kind of ragtime, folky, up-tempo songs, but this is different. This is going to be quite an exciting show, and we're getting ready to make a record with them.
Oh, Mazel.
Starting today, we're in rehearsal, getting ready for this recording and this gig.
Oh, that's fantastic. What label?
We don't know yet.
Oh, okay. So you're going to record and then rehearse it, and can I ask?
Yes.
What are a couple of the songs that you'll be doing at Joe's Pub, if you know them?
Trust in Me, That's Life, I'll Guess, These Foolish Things, I Cried for You, After You've Gone.
Even standards that were almost Tin Pan Alley standards, more than folk standards as well.
Well, they were songs that were recorded by swing and jazz musicians back in the 30s. Songs that were recorded by people like Mildred Bailey and Billie Holiday when she was young, and Connie Boswell and stuff like that.
Jim Kweskin, when you listen to music for pleasure, like in the car or on an iPod, what stuff have you been listening to recently?
I still listen mostly to traditional the old music. I listen a lot to my Pandora program, and I put in my own station, and my own station includes everything from Django Reinhardt to Leadbelly. But it's all that old style of music that I always have loved and still love. It's the blues guys, it's Reverend Gary Davis, it's Billie Holiday, it's Hank Williams, it's Jimmy Rogers, it's Gus Cannon's Jug Stompers. I listen to all those people. Uncle Dave Macon, Mississippi John Hurt.
Wow.
Hundreds of them, and I love them.
Just for fun, though, did you keep up with modern music at all from, like, the 1990s on, of rock and roll or pop or the stuff you see on American Idol, or not at all interested?
No, I like it. It's not the stuff that I love, but I do follow it. I do listen to it. I hear it, but it's not on my iPod.
Okay.
I respect a lot of these musicians. I think that people like, I think Lady Gaga is an extremely talented person. I think Taylor Swift is extremely talented. It's just not the kind of music that I'm particularly drawn to, but I admire and respect them as musicians, and I have no problem listening to their music. It's just not the music that I'm wildly attracted to.
By the way, you've been a musician for all these years, and a lot of what you had to do, especially over, I would guess, the past 20, 25 years with the recording industry so changed, is to make your living on the road, make your living in person doing live stuff. But you're also a married man with a grown son. So what has it been like all those years trying to be a family person, but also having to make a living the way a musician does?
Well, I didn't make my living as a musician.
Okay. Were you building houses?
I was in the construction business.
Yeah, no, I wasn't joking. I read that on Wikipedia, and I was questioning that.
That's true.
How'd you get into that?
I have a friend, and together we formed a construction company back in the 60s. When I broke up the jug band, I made up my mind at that time to not have to play music for a living. I no longer wanted to have to I didn't want to play music because I had to. I wanted to play music because I wanted to. So my friends and I formed this construction company. I was able to make my living doing that, and then I could play music when I felt like it, and play where I wanted to, when I wanted to, with who I wanted to, as much as I wanted to, and not have to worry about whether or not I was taking care of supporting my family. By the way, I have more than a son. I have 3 children.
Oh, Mazel Miklik. I'm sorry. Congratulations on that. And are you
as well, and I have 8 grandchildren.
8 Oh, Mazel. None of my business, but are you raising them Jewish?
Not particularly, one way or the other.
All right.
My son married an Irish Catholic.
Okay.
So, we're all mixed up now.
It happens. What can I tell? But weren't you a little worried, like when you were in the construction business, if you're hammering and sawing and doing all this stuff, worried that you might hurt your fingers?
Oh, yeah, I was. And actually, I did a couple of times.
Oh.
But, nothing that kept me from, it could have been worse. I didn't cut off my fingers.
Thank God. But are you retired from construction?
Yes, just last year.
Oh, that's lovely. That's mazel tov on that as well. So now you can concentrate full time on your hobby, I guess, which is music, which you're doing mostly for love still.
Yes, but I'm doing a lot more gigs now than I was when I was with the construction company. As I got older, I was only doing the actual carpentry part early on. Very shortly into it, I was, a supervisor.
That's the best thing. Middle management is the best, let me tell you.
Well, I wasn't swinging a hammer.
Okay. Man. Now, speaking of living situations, one of the weird things, and we didn't really allude to this so much in the conversation about the 60s, though, was one of the members of the jug band, this guy named Mel Lyman, and you lived with him, and he was a friend. What are your overall thoughts? Because there are people who said he started a cult and was a little crazy and dangerous. Your thoughts on Mel Lyman?
No cult. It was a communal family. It was written up very badly because Rolling Stone wanted something to follow up their Charlie Manson story, so they wrote about our communal family, and it was all totally wrong.
Oh, okay.
They got it all wrong, and then they did it to sensationalize and sell magazines or whatever they call newspapers, whatever that is, whatever it was back then. It was on newsprint back in those days.
Right.
And it was just wrong. They got it wrong.
How did you like living in a communal situation? I mean, you don't live like that now. You got a house and kids. But did you like that sort of all together?
I'm still part of that group.
Really?
Yes, really.
So you share groceries and then produce and things like that? How does it work?
Yeah, it works. I don't want to get into the whole thing. It's too long. That's a whole other conversation.
Okay.
Say that it works.
Well, mazel, that's good. Now, speaking of cult-like figures, check out this segue. One of the people who was on a recent album of yours, Penny's Farm, was Van Dyke Parks, and he seems like such a fascinating guy. Do you have any stories about him?
No, Geoffrey Muldaur brought him in. I know him, but Geoffrey Muldaur knows him well. I don't really know him that well. We were never like friends or anything like that. I mean, I had met him before, but I really don't know him, and I don't have any stories about him at all.
Okay, I thought I would ask. And I think what is lovely is that you mentioned, Geoff Muldaur brought him in, that you guys are still friends. You get along even after all these years. They joined you on a reunion tour. Jeff and Maria did a few years back.
We got some gigs coming up together.
Oh, you do? See?
Yeah.
Wonderful. What, do you tour internationally or just domestic?
Mostly domestic, but I've done tours in Japan and Europe, so I've done some, but mostly domestic. This is domestic, but in the fall I got some gigs coming up in Alaska. I've never been there, so I'm excited about that.
Whoa, that's exciting.
It is domestic, but it's pretty far away.
This is the time to do it. You can't wait 10 more or 15 more years of your life. Do these things now while you can.
Why, can't I do these gigs when I'm 90?
You can try, and God willing, you'll be... How are you feeling? Are you physically well? Do you have any issues? How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good.
Thank God. And the one thing I forgot to mention, and people with children or even actually people my age will love this. I never realized that you guys, you, Jim Kweskin, and your early band, you did the song The Ladybug's Picnic for Sesame Street. I love that song. How did that come about?
Me too. Well, they just called me up. It was a children's television workshop. Called me up and asked me to do it. So I went in and did it. That's all.
Okay, it's a fabulous song. We're going to play it as part of the segment. We've been talking with Jim Kweskin, who is, again, it's Kweskin. He's got a website. You can find out all about where he's touring and his background and what he's done. JimKweskin.com. And also, go see him at Joe's Pub on Lafayette Street, downtown Manhattan, part of the Public Theater there, this Wednesday night, May 30th. You can buy tickets, by the way, at publictheater.org, and that's theater, E-R, publictheater.org. Last question for you, Jim, and we thank you so much for joining us. So, if you had to pick an all-time favorite song that you play, and an all-time favorite song of yours that you don't play, that you just like to listen to, what would they be?
Oh, boy. It's impossible. That's like asking me to pick which child I like best of my kids. You can't do that. I have no idea. I mean, it changes from day to day. Every day, whatever song I'm working on.
All right. I mean, a lot of music, I understand the impetus behind that, but then I'll force you to answer this one. Do you have a favorite album that you or one of your bands put out?
Well, I would say I have a couple. I mean, of the early albums, I really liked the Jim Kweskin's America album, which is not the Jug Band, but it's some other musicians. It was just slightly after the Jug Band. Although I think of all the Jug Band albums, I would say the one called Jug Band Music is my favorite. The one where Maria sings "I'm a Woman," and anyway, there's that. And then more recently, the album that I did with Geoff Muldaur called Penny's Farm. I'm very proud of that album. And I'm also on an album. It's not my album, but I'm on an album called the Texas Sheiks. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No, Texas Sheiks, like the Arab Sheiks?
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's Geoff Muldaur and his Texas Sheiks. It's his band. He put it together, and I joined him and played guitar and banjo on a few songs and sang 3 of the songs on the album. And that's a really good, if you like roots revival music, where us guys take some of these some material that I've been doing all my life and give it our arrangement, but still stick to the feel of the time when these songs were played. That's a really good one.
Well, this has been a really, really good one, talking to Jim Kweskin. We wish you great music ahead, a terrific time this Wednesday night at Joe's Pub, and good luck on the new album that you'll be working on, and everything that you'll be doing for 10, 20, 30 more years, God willing. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, nice talking to you. Thank you.
Shalom.